Uh, the Agena had separated. We did command it into a normal attitude, and it has been in that attitude since. It stabilized down to a 0, 0, 0, and we're now beginning to look at that in detail, and we'll be looking at that during the night to see what further tests we want to perform with the Agena. The crew at the time of the problem were using the Agena to control the docked vehicle, to stabilize the docked vehicle, and all electronic control within the spacecraft was turned off when this when the system took off in yaw and roll. As Dr. Gilruth has said, we have a lot of data. It's going to take a long time to look at that, and we want to correlate the recorded data we have from on board the Agena and from on board the spacecraft before we can determine exactly what happened. During this time period, the crew had gone to RCS, the re-entry control system, in order to stabilize the spacecraft. And one of the mission rules we have associated with that is that if we do blow those squibs for the RCS system, we must consider re-entering at the next best planned landing area. In this particular case, we decided to pick the 7-3 area, where we could get to them relatively quickly. We had good aircraft coverage there, and we had a destroyer within a few hours of that position. We told the crew that that's what we decided. They went along and got into retro attitude, and from that time on, it was a standard retro procedure. We loaded the Module 4 from the auxiliary tape memory, which gave us the re-entry program. We were able to uplink to the spacecraft. The computer and the IMU were working perfectly. We were able to upload the information for the retrofire. We were able to confirm that on board and on the ground. We went through all the re-entry checklists and made sure that everything they had on board was satisfactory for this type of re-entry. And as you know, from that time on, we just checked with the crew. We got the final countdown to retrofire over Kano, and in fact, just beyond what we would normally expect to be Kano loss of signal, we did get an indication from the crew that all 4 retros had fired and that the delta V's associated with that were nominal. And in fact, everything must have gone perfectly because the recovery aircraft sighted the spacecraft on the chute some 3 miles away, so everybody was right where they were supposed to be today. And in fact, it was quite remarkable that everything went so well as far as the re-entry was concerned, considering the conditions there. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think we ought to add that this was one of the operations where all our planning really paid off for us in terms of both the onboard operations and the operations with the DOD. And I think probably General Houston might say a few words about the recovery operation there.
Yes. General Houston.
We immediately deployed 5 aircraft, 3 C-54s, an H-216, and a C-130. Of course, immediately began to move the Mason toward the aiming point. As it turned out, the first airplane scheduled to arrive on the scene at the aiming point was a C-54 from Naha, some 22 minutes prior to planned splash time. This is essentially what did happen. He arrived at the aiming point at that time. Also, in cooperation and conjunction with Mr. Thompson in the recovery operation for NASA, we decided to place the next aircraft, which was due to arrive on the scene at a point 100 miles west of the aiming point, with the intention that we could get best coverage this way, and if we undershot, he would probably be in the most likely position, and also with the intention that if they did not get a signal or see the spacecraft, they would search toward the eastward. Of course, as was just pointed out, the 54 that I referred to on the aiming point did see the spacecraft in the air some 3 miles away. Immediately began to deploy its swimmers, and got 3 swimmers in the water. At this time, it has the collar around the spacecraft. They have verified the condition of the astronauts. And we have, again, mutually agreed that the best procedure is to await the Mason to arrive, which is probably approximately a little less than an hour and a half at this point in time from now, to pick up the astronauts and the spacecraft, but to retain the HU-16 as a cap overhead, just in case there is some contingency developed, which we do not expect. Our decision was based primarily on the fact that the flying time of the HU-16 from the spacecraft back to Okinawa would get the astronauts to medical attention later than waiting on the destroyer, where they will have a doctor on board the ship. I think that does it.
All right, sir, do you have some questions? You, sir.
Dr. Gilruth and John Hodge both indicated that the crew had to do its utmost to regain control of the spacecraft. Just what was the situation? Just how serious was this? Was the spacecraft in danger of breaking up, of coming apart?
Well, I don't think we know the answer. I based my statement on the fact that this was an uncalled for and certainly unplanned occurrence, unexpected occurrence, and no doubt was very disconcerting to the crew. And so I gathered from their comments I could hear that this did tax their skill considerably.
Just been handed a message here which is